You're listening to the Better People podcast. I'm your host, Tom Warner, and today we're continuing our conversation from last week, talking about counseling options for people who need that, and more specifically, I say cost-effective or free, or options available to people that do maybe they are blessed to have some insurance. Looking at those options, but it's also admittedly a daunting task in finding a counselor. Cool. And with us, that's Rhonda Ramirez in the background. She's our ongoing guest, also licensed professional counselor from Central Texas. And today, last week, and then today we're going to continue. But last week we were talking about options for counseling, and thought it might be a great episode, especially as we're in the holidays and people start looking at renewing themselves for next year. And so Rhonda, you had mentioned some options, and you were going to kind of go over options for I guess counseling options, and then in addition,
right.
You were kind of talk about what someone would expect on their first counseling session, often called an intake.
Correct.
So with that said, let's start.
Well, I want to start with if you are looking for counseling therapy, and at this point we're gonna use the word counseling and therapy interchangeable. There is sometimes a slight time difference, but right now we're going to use it interchangeably. If you're looking for therapy and it has been difficult to get a hold of someone, or someone's not calling back, please don't give up. Right now, most therapists I know have a full schedule. So it's kind of difficult to get in right now. I would say partly due to the pandemic, but just some other things going on. So don't give up. Keep trying. That's what I would say. Also, make sure that when you're looking for a therapist, I would say the top thing that you need to really look for is someone you click with, someone that feels comfortable, someone that you can trust. If those things are not there, it's going to be difficult to make progress, just in general. So if you go to someone and you see them a couple of times and you're like, I don't feel comfortable, don't give up. Talk to them, tell them you don't feel comfortable, and you're gonna look for another provider. They may give you some options for other people that they know, and you might have to try a couple of therapists before you find one that you really feel comfortable with. Or you may be really lucky and find one that you feel like you can trust completely the first time you meet. So I would say if you are willing to try therapy, to try counseling, to come back to therapy, come back to counseling, don't give up if it doesn't go quite right the first couple of times. There are many different options, and you just have to find the right fit. That would be the very first thing I say.
Is that common? I mean, is that common for people to not jive with their counselor? Maybe they're a great counselor, but they just so that is a common occurrence?
I don't know that I don't know what the percentage is or anything, but I do know that sometimes you might meet with someone and you just don't get the right feeling. Mm-hmm. It hasn't happened much with me personally. But I have seen people who have come to me and said, the last therapist I saw, I just didn't feel comfortable with them. So I went, but I didn't get a whole lot out of it. So if that can happen. And sometimes it's just that they have a theoretical view that just doesn't work with your personality, or maybe they're a little more structured than you would like. Maybe they're a little more laid back than you would like. They might confront you. Well, all therapists are going to confront you with things, but if they're doing their job, they're going to confront you with things. But it may be in a way that you feel and see as aggressive, or maybe it's not quite as strong as you would like. First, talk to your therapist, because we're pretty flexible people in general. I always tell people, listen, if you need something different from me, let's talk about, don't just ghost me. Don't just not show up. Let's talk about what you need from me, because I am a pretty flexible person. At my core, I'm very laid back, and I'm going to kind of find our way through this, but I can be more structured if you would like me to be more structured. I can do some other things if you would like me to do different types of things. So I don't know how common it is, but I do know it sometimes happens. So I just want to say, don't give up if you try the first one and you're like, nope, this isn't working.
Okay.
Now,
No, I guess no, I understand that as kind of an odd transition there back to the original topic. So,
yeah,
so what were some of the resources, and what would lead someone down? What are some paths people can take?
So when you're looking for a therapist, for a counselor, I would first start with word of mouth. That would be my first place to go. And word of mouth would be, of course, ask people you trust. Don't ask people that you're not sure you trust them, because that's not good word of mouth. It may be a friend. It may be a coworker. It may be someone at your church, or, it's just someone you trust. Just ask and see, hey, I'm kind of looking for something, or you don't even have to tell them you're looking. You can just say, I have a friend looking for a therapist. Do you know anybody? And that would be the first place I would start, is word of mouth, because we know that generally is the best way to find out who is really effective and what is going to work best. So I would definitely start out with word of mouth. Ask someone you trust. The next thing I would say is, if you are lucky enough to have insurance, look at your provider list and just get on. Most of those are online now. You can kind of go on and look and say, okay, who is a provider that is covered by my insurance? And that would be a great way to start, is just kind of look down. You can also, I wouldn't call it Facebook stalking. I would call it investigate. You can look at those names, and then you can kind of look them up. And, most people, if they have a website, they have a little biography about themselves. They might have a photograph. They might tell you what type of therapy they do. And sometimes that can help you direct you to the right person. So I would definitely say, look at the provider list. Yes, sir.
Are there keywords that we should be looking for? And I refer to you as an LPC, or licensed professional counselor, because to the best of my knowledge, that is the official word for it. Are there any other terms that people need to know about?
So I would definitely say you need to go to someone licensed. There are people who may use the term counselor, but don't have a license. But in general, you want someone who is licensed. So that would be an LPC, which is a licensed practicing counselor, or an LMFT, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
So,
and the difference,
to clarify myself, have I been saying it incorrect? Is it licensed practicing counselor? Is that the correct way of saying it?
I'm sorry, I did say practicing, but it really is professional.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I wanted to make sure, because I could totally be doing something wrong for months on end and not know about it, and so okay.
You have been saying it correctly. I said it incorrectly. Okay. Sometimes it just doesn't flow off my mouth.
No worries.
Anyway.
No worries. I was getting scared there. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yes, you're right. Licensed professional counselor.
Okay.
That happens to be the license that I have. So I forget sometimes.
And you practice counseling still. That counts as well.
I do that. And then the LMFT, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist. So the difference between the two is just generally, if you go to a marriage and family therapist, they're going to look at whatever issues you're dealing with and look at it more as a family system and what is going on in the family. It doesn't mean that you have to take your family. It doesn't mean that you have to take your spouse, but they're definitely going to look at what you are dealing with and your goals, and they're going to see it more as a system thing, as I would say, like as an organism, like as a family, as a couple, as an organism, and what is in balance and what isn't. When you, we also, as LPCs, also took courses in marriage and family. We definitely deal with marriage and family, but our base theories are not always looking at the whole thing, but we definitely do include the whole thing. It's just a little bit different way of looking at things. And so either one can provide you services, either one. And either one can see individuals, couples, families, any type of group. So those two are great options. There's also an LMSW, which is a licensed social worker. Let me see. Let me think of what the actual term is. LM license. Do not take me on that. There is a social worker license that is a clinical social worker. LCSW, I think it is. Licensed clinical social worker. That's the one. And they also can provide therapy services. And again, they're just coming from a social perspective rather than an individual perspective. All three can do therapy. We also have psychologists and psychiatrists. They also can do therapy, but they hold a doctorate degree instead of just a master's level. And then psychiatrists specifically hold an MD and can write prescriptions. But all of those levels can do therapy.
Okay.
Now, you don't have to go to a psychiatrist only to get a prescription. Let's say for some reason you need some anxiety meds. You can go to a master's level LPC or LMFT therapist, and you guys maybe agree that maybe that's something you want to try. Then you can just go to your regular doctor, your general practitioner doctor, and they can prescribe you those meds as well.
Basically,
so
like a reference to say, hey,
right.
I'm seeing this patient. I highly recommend Xanax or whatever it may be for this client or some sort of.
Yes. And most MDs will just take your word and say, listen, I am seeing a therapist. We've talked about it, and we think this is a thing that I might need to try out. And then, of course, they're going to give you a little bit of screening to make sure that they agree, but they generally don't have an issue doing that.
I see.
So looking at the provider list, they will have different letters out beside them, but they can all provide you with therapy.
Okay. So let's say you've established your list, and you, speaking of lists, you'd actually told me before we started talking that you've got, you yourself have like a 9-point list as well. So I don't want to step on any of that. So if you want to continue down that path, it'll just kind of come down to questions of, you'd mentioned Starry, at least in Texas area, and then and other options. So let's say you do have insurance and you are able to have it covered or portions of it covered. I assume that would be a good place to start.
Yes.
And then from there, you had mentioned that, there are low cost options and sliding scale options. So maybe go into that. And then, obviously if I've stepped on any of your lists, correct me and start from there.
Well, I was going to say, we definitely have some low cost options. Let me go back and touch something before we get to those kind of resources. Let me go back and I'm going to talk about, you can also get online and use reliable databases to look up therapists. And by reliable databases, I would say, start with the American Psychological Association database or the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists database. Don't just get on Reddit and look for a therapist, but look for therapists that are associated with those national and state associations, and that is another place to look for therapists. There's a Texas association that has a database, and those will list everyone in your area. You can look up by area, you can look up by zip code, but those will list reliable therapists that are licensed. And that's another way to look for names. And then, like I said, you can go and research those names and see if the biography piques your interest or where they're located or things like that. Now, let's get back to the kind of the local resources that may be sliding scale or may be free or little cost. And most of them are going to be little. There is the one, which I'll go back and talk about again, that is free to kiddos, 0 to 18. But most therapists will probably at least be cost something. So, but it could be very sliding scale. So when we talk about local resources, if you're in college or if you're attending a college, every college and university I know has therapists on campus, and you just have to contact. Some colleges call them the testing center. Some just talk to the people who work at the college, and they'll point you in the right direction. And those therapists are generally free for the college students at that time. So that's an option. Now, especially, a lot of workplaces are putting out I know we get a weekly, health email, and it's reminding us there are counselors and therapists in the area. You click here if you want to see some. There are people who work directly with our organization. Click here if you'd like to see that. And then just if you are connected with any local organizations that deal with specific things like Foster Love, Bell County, if you happen to know somebody who's associated with that, I know that they have a list of counselors that they referrals that they give out. If you are going to a child abuse seminar or you're going to a group for child abuse survivors, they definitely have lists and referrals there. So anything that you're connected with that is maybe dealing in the community or a community service will probably have a list of referrals that they most likely have printed out, and you can just have a whole page full. And they're always willing to give those out. So do you feel like that answered some of the questions?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Then, you can also reach out if you have a specific thing that you're looking for. Let's say, you, maybe you suffer from depression, or you feel like you have some, maybe not necessarily a full-out eating disorder, but some disordered eating, disorganized eating. There's different terms for that. Look on those websites: the National Eating Disorders Association, the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. Look at those websites, and they also have, or even if you feel like you have some definite trauma and you have some PTSD, maybe some flashbacks, or you have some moments where you just kind of freeze, you can also look on the National Center for PTSD. They also have a list of people in the area. So I think just kind of thinking about what are my goals for going to therapy and counseling, and then kind of using those to help find someone that fits that need. And then also really sit down and think about, what are my actual goals? What do I want to do? There may be, it may be that you just want to better yourself. You are not exactly sure how to organize your life to make you more efficient, or maybe you're looking to enjoy your life more and you're not exactly sure why that's not happening. Maybe you are going through a life transition and you just need some help figuring out how to organize that, how to kind of transitions are always hard. Nobody likes to change. Change is difficult. So, maybe that's the goal, is to figure out, how do I get from point A to point B without, feeling like overwhelmed. Those are some reasons why you might go to therapy and counseling. It may be that, I feel like I might actually be depressed, or I feel like I have anxiety that is overwhelming. I don't know why I continue doing this pattern in my life. I have a pattern of continually ruining relationships this particular way. I need to figure out how to change that. Those are things. Or it may be that, my family and I are not really communicating well, and we just want to learn how to communicate better. I have 2 kids in elementary, my husband and I, and we just need to learn some different tools to communicate better, so that we're not always just giving information, but we're also talking about what is actually going on in our lives, what emotions we might have, how to do better, feel like we're not failing, that kind of thing. So think about the goals you have for therapy ahead of time, and that may help you decide on what therapist you want to go see. Because if you have some family things going on, you might want to take the family with you, or you might want to take your spouse or your significant other with you. So that would definitely help you decide, well, this person definitely sees couples. This person definitely sees families. This person says they work really great with relational issues between family members. And those are things that you'll see on a biography of somebody.
And so that's what you're looking for. I mean, that's really kind of the keyword you're looking for.
When you're kind of thinking about, why do I want to go, you're going to look for kind of those keywords. Is somebody really good, or they're experienced in dealing with anxiety and depression? Pretty much at this point, I think we all have some experience with that. I'm
an expert. So no.
We all just have something right now. So those are things that you can definitely use as search words or keywords when you're looking at somebody's biography, what they like to see, what they like to treat. So those are things that definitely you have to kind of have your goals in mind. Or you may be in a place where you're like, I don't know what's going on. I just feel like this isn't how I should be living or enjoying my life. Well, that's okay too. We can figure that out too.
Mm-hmm. So you can also go to a counselor if you have no goals that you can think of, and to kind of help.
I was going to say, yeah.
Okay.
If you're just kind of floating, or maybe the feeling may be more like drowning. I'm not exactly sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you feel like you don't have any direction. Well, that's cool. The counselor can help you figure out what do you want for your life, because maybe that is the issue, is that you're not exactly sure, but you need someone to give you some perspective and help you figure out, okay, this is the direction I want to go. So that maybe
in your case, you've gone. That's where the key part is in your training versus going to a friend.
Mm-hmm.
A friend can give good advice, and some of it's very good advice, but you've been trained to kind of approach it from a scientific method of, hey, let's break this down, and from. So basically, your training goes into, and I don't know quite how I'm trying to say it, so jump in at any time. But your training accounts for, hey, there's a difference between talking to just a friend versus, hey, we're trained to know what to ask you.
Right, and I would say that if you are going to a therapist or a counselor, in general, we're not just going to give you advice, because you are the only one that's living your life. So you get to decide how you do that. We are, and you know what? I'm going to tell you what I tell what I tell my new clients when we do that intake that you were talking about, when I do that intake, I describe counseling therapy as we're driving in a car. You, the person who is coming to therapy, is the driver. And you're going to tell me what direction you want to go. And I might help with some maps, or I might help with some directions and say, hey, have you thought about going this way? Or have you considered that maybe I see you want to go here, but we might have to make a pit stop over here. So that's my kind of simple description of how therapy goes. I don't know where you want to go. I tell people all the time, I cannot make any decisions for your life because I'm barely doing good at making decisions for my own life. Like, I'm barely handling that. But I can help you with perspective. I can help you with tools to figure out where you want to go. I can help you and say, hey, have you noticed that you're repeating this, that maybe we should look at why that's something that we continually do, So I never say therapists or counselors give advice, because that is just a trap that I do not want to be in.
Sure.
But we definitely have a different perspective. And because we are not your friends, we are not emotionally connected to any part of your life, it's much easier to give that perspective. I'm sure there are, I would say several times a week, the things that I say to other people, I'm like, oh, I should mental note, say that to myself sometimes. But I am not.
So does it provide an introspective view as you're giving advice to other people that you're like, sometimes. I should listen to my own advice?
Yes, sometimes that is the case. We want to make sure that you have the ability and the knowledge and the tools to go where you want to go. Because I am not an expert on anybody else's life. I'm, again, barely an expert on mine sometimes. So that's how I personally see therapy. And I think it's an easy way to understand kind of what we do. So I think now, and I say that in every intake. Mm-hmm. But before we move on to what that intake looks like, do you have? Yeah.
No, you were going to ask if I have any questions or.
Yeah.
No, I think so. See, I jokingly tell people that you counsel me through. I'm kidding. Through so free counseling for me. No, I joke. No, I really don't. I'm just trying to think if there were anything that popped up whenever you had said that. No, I think
I will.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I will also say that now, because of the technology that is available, there's also online therapy that is available to people as well. So you can contact a therapist through an online therapy option. So that's another. I think it's a great option, especially if you are not in the same place all the time. And some people really get a lot out of it. And especially when we were in lockdown, mm-hmm. I definitely switched to some FaceTime sessions instead of in-person sessions. But I would try, if all possible, to be in person, just because you get a different feeling.
Yeah, and I'm sure it varies per person, but I'm an in-person person, because mm-hmm. I can see facial expressions a bit easier. Right. I can pick up on body movements and mm-hmm. and I don't know. That's just maybe that's as I'm an extroverted introvert. Sometimes when it comes to that.
Well, I specifically had someone tell me that they felt like when we were in lockdown and we were doing FaceTime just to keep going, they specifically said, I feel like I'm not quite as honest with you as when I am with you in person. Mm-hmm. And if that's the feeling, you definitely need to see someone in person, because we need to be honest, not only with your therapist, but with yourself. And so mm-hmm. that's really important, is to be comfortable, to be able to feel like you can trust your therapist, and mm-hmm. to be honest, is really, really important. So I'm going to kind of move on to kind of what the intake looks like.
Yeah, walk us through intake, and I know it varies a little bit per therapist. Can I say therapist? Is that the right word?
Therapist, counselor is either.
Therapist, counselor.
I usually call myself therapist more. I don't know why. I think I just gravitate toward that more.
But
both fit.
So it's intake's a little different for a little bit, but it's going to be somewhat universal in what your objectives are. And so let's just start with what is intake, and then go on to maybe what you're looking to find out. And you kind of touched on some of it earlier, goals, but you lay down the rules basically.
For sure. We're going to, as any good therapist would, you model what you want your clients to do. So in that first intake, we want to model that we have some boundaries for counseling and what that looks like. So, at first, we kind of give our spiel at the very beginning. We introduce ourselves and we go through our paperwork, right? So we talk about, this is who I am. I always say I've been doing therapy since 2009. I kind of give people a kind of time frame that I'm not brand new. You're not my brand new guinea pig or anything. But we also give information, if you ever need to, if you ever feel the need, like I violated one of the ethics, here's the information to call or get in touch with our ethics board. And then we just talk about what is therapy. And that's where I usually talk about my car situation. And then I also ask every time, is therapy new to you, or have you seen other therapists before? And did you have, was that a good interaction, a bad interaction, like a mediocre, nothing, kind of thing? Because I want to see where people are coming from, because I do have people who have come into my office and said, the therapist that I had, I didn't trust them. They told me some things that I think now are not necessarily the soundest things, and it just wasn't a good thing. I'm like, okay, well, good. I need to know kind of that we're overcoming some of that thing, some of that negative experience. Or if we're brand new, I'm definitely going to give you a little bit more information. I also say, hey, this is about how long our counseling sessions last. About 50 minutes. Kind of depends on where you're at. Some people, especially if you have kiddos, sometimes we do a little bit shorter. And sometimes they last a little bit longer if we're needing to do other things. Some people do some testing and stuff. Then we talk about basically what does confidentiality mean? We are set by our ethical board to be confidential, and that's why counseling and therapy works, is because whatever I get told is stuck in my brain forever. I don't go home and say, man, you should have heard the story I heard today. Everything that you tell me is confidential. And that there are basically two exceptions to that. If we talk about child abuse or elder abuse, both of those things we need to turn in to the appropriate authorities, because we'd like to take care of the people who cannot take care for themselves. And then if you are a danger to yourself or to someone else, and that is something else that we would discuss in length, and that would be something that we might have to call somebody about as well. So other than those two things, everything that I get told it never leaves. Even if you tell me you robbed the bank, never leaves my head. So that is one of the reasons why therapy works, is because it's confidential. Another thing is, because of the type of relationship that is built with your therapist, it's definitely more intimate than you would think. And I use the word intimate as close, not like sexual intimacy at all, but as close.
That's good.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things we don't do. But that intimate relationship, meaning that you, the client, the person who's coming, is going to tell me about their worst days, is going to tell me things that they wouldn't tell their best friend. So that's why that I keep saying it's really important to trust your therapist and to be comfortable with them, because you are going to share things that you may not have said out loud to anyone. You may have thought them, but you may not have said out loud to anyone, and that's important for us to keep that confidentiality going. And because of that relationship, because it is so close and we know so much, we definitely do not have dual relationships. And so dual relationships means that we are your therapist, and that's the only way we interact with you. So I cannot tell one of my clients, hey, I'm going to go on vacation. Can you come to my house and watch my cat? That would be another type of relationship. Or, we can't go to dinner together, because that would be more friendship. So we kind of have those rules made so that we give the safest possible way to communicate all of the things that nobody really wants to talk about. Excuse me. And then we talk about fees. And then we usually have like an intake questionnaire. Some are shorter, some are longer. It may ask questions about, your actual development as a human as you've gotten older. It may ask about specific relationships. It also, of course, will ask you those things that generally the doctor's office asks you. Your name, are you married, are you single, how long have you been married, what's your highest level of schooling, let me think, what medications do you take, if you take medications, those kind of basic things that a doctor's office would ask too, just so we're aware of kind of the whole picture, because mind, body, soul, all connected. So physical, spiritual, mental, all connected, emotional, all connected. So, there's generally an intake questionnaire and has lots of questions. And then by that time, there's probably about half the session done. And I usually just say, so, what was the final straw that you said, okay, it's time to come talk to somebody? And then I just start listening. That's kind of how my personal intake sessions go. Have you experienced anything different?
Are you asking me as the host, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind admitting to people listening. I haven't, seen a counselor, and seeing one now currently, and it was very similar. In my case, it was, the whole first session. She said, "Hey, this is going to be the whole thing is the intake. So we're not going to get deep into the issues today,
right?
But then it was like, and then the next week, and also I should back up, during the intake, it was explained that, hey, in general, most people seek counseling for X amount of times. It's not a hard, fast rule, but, most people are in counseling overall this amount of time, to kind of give you an idea of the exit options. And then they went into, if you need to sever the counseling relationship, that's not a problem. You can do so. You just, just tell me, and we're done, and so you're not locked into any, not like a contractual thing or anything like that.
No, and we're not forcing you to come. Yes, if you are like, this isn't working, or I feel like I'm done, I need to go out and kind of see if I can use this stuff, then cool, just let us know. Yeah. I would say that's pretty much my intake kind of spiel, and we've gone over kind of how you find a therapist. Here's a few things that you might ask if you are doing an intake or talking to somebody that you might see. If you have questions that are important to you, ask them. Of course, are you licensed? And I would say that's a must. How long have you been a therapist? Do you have experience with what I'm dealing with? Another important question, do you take Medicare or Medicaid? Mm-hmm. That's an important question. And then if you have something very specific, you can also ask them even in the intake. If you get to the intake, I always end my intake with, if there's something that you feel like I really need to know before you leave, you definitely can tell me. It's just something that you feel like you need to get off your chest at this moment. That's short, but something that I need to know, you can tell me. So those are questions that you might ask if you go see somebody. You're trying somebody out.
Well, I think this has been very helpful information. And again, back to my experience, I had never seen a counselor before, or a therapist, whichever term we go with. I had never seen anybody. And so for me, I say that when I was a teenager, and again, I don't care if people know, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I had a rarity, apparently, I've learned over the years, of my psychiatrist was also a psychologist or a counselor.
Yes, that's
so
pretty rare.
It was rare because he could prescribe medicine, but he could also, run therapy. And so that had been really my only experience, and that was me as a teenager. Now at my more closer to late 30s, not 40, close, getting there. Give me another year. Yep. Unfortunately, is I hadn't, and so not that it was intimidating, but the whole process of getting from, hey, I need to talk to somebody, to talking to somebody, in my mind was daunting because I didn't have enough information. So I'm hopeful this information helps somebody in the future realize, okay, here's what I need to do. Because a lot of us will think we'll realize you need to see a counselor, but it's not an immediate connection from point A to point B of, I need a counselor to, I'm going to call a counselor tomorrow. Hey, I'm seeing a counselor. Right. A lot of times you're like, do I need to see one? Nah, I don't think I need to see one. I'll give it some more time. And then as a result of that, you end up getting there's more damage involved often. Internal,
more
overwhelmed. And so, a lot of times it's like, I'll consider it, but not right now. It's just too much work.
Right.
And some of that is, effort on our part as the patients, but, or lack of, but the other half is sometimes you just don't know what is actually available, what you should ask for. And I think this has been very helpful. So I am hopeful that somebody will be able to take this information and use it, apply it to their lives. And I greatly appreciate all this information. I hope our listeners do as well. We'll tell you what, we're going to go and wrap up. And just go and stay on the line as usual, and I'll be right back with you. Yeah. But other than that, I'm going to start to close this out here and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you've been listening to the Better People podcast. We've had Rhonda Ramirez on today, a licensed professional counselor, Central Texas, talking about, ways of finding counseling and kind of what to expect during that process. Again, hopefully this information has been helpful. Drop us a line at hello@betterpeoplepodcast.com and visit our website at betterpeoplepodcast.com as well. And as always, thanks for listening.